Hello everyone. Today we're about to dive into the process of modeling our exhaust system. First up, let's bring up our trusty gizmo. Just click on the gear icon and choose Cylinder 3D. Then we can go ahead and press that Unify button. Our next move is to scale it down a bit, and then we're going to scale it on the Z axis. Now it's time to add some edge loops. With that done, let's go back to our gizmo. Click on the gear icon again, and this time, let's select Bend Curve. Let's start off with 5 points, and feel free to add more when you need them. What we're doing here is building the shape from the side perspective. Once you've got a shape you like, head back up to the gear and press Accept. Now let's snap our model to the front view and apply another bend curve from the gizmo. This time around, let's start with just 2 points to make a significant change in our shape. Remember, you can always add more points if you need to. Once you're satisfied, press Accept to lock it in. Let's duplicate the subtool, then slide the undo back until you see your original straight cylinder. Time to bring up the gizmo once again. Click on the gear icon and select Bend Curve. From the side view, let's go with our 5-point strategy just like we did before. And remember, you can always add more points whenever you need them. We're going to go with variety here, so every exhaust will look slightly different. That's why we have to do this process 4 times in total. Once you're happy with your changes, press Accept. Let's snap to the front view and do another bend curve, starting with 3 points this time. You can switch on the visibility of the second subtool to get a sense of the relationship between the two. When you're happy, press Accept to lock it in. Let's go ahead and make another copy of the subtool and undo it until it's back to being a cylinder. Do another bend curve with 5 points and press Accept when you're done. Time to duplicate our subtool one last time and repeat the process. Snap to the side view, grab the bend curve, and when you're ready, press Accept. For our front view, select the bend curve brush and start with 3 points. When we finish this part, it's time to merge all the subtools. Then we can press QC50. Now go ahead and press Ctrl W to group visible. Grab the slice curve brush and add in an edge loop. Then bevel the edge loop from the slice. Go ahead and repeat as needed. Next we can polygroup those bevels. For the polygon action, select Extrude, and for the target, select Polygroup All. Press the Shift key to switch it to a move operation. From the ZBrush, select Slide Edge Loop Complete. Then we can make some adjustments with Move Infinite Radius. Press QC50 again, followed by Crease PG, and set the crease level to 3. Unmask the ends of the exhaust and use the gizmo to scale them flush. Make a duplicate of the subtool and press Ctrl W to group visible. Unmask the edge loops and clip them flat. Grab the end of the exhaust, delete the hidden parts, and press Close Holes. Then we can mask the caps and press Ctrl W to polygroup the mask. Now we can unmask the caps, extrude them with the gizmo, and scale them down. Let's go ahead and mask the model, and from the gizmo's gear, select Cylinder 3D. Rotate it 90 degrees and scale it down. Use the Move Infinite Depth brush to make some shape changes. Press Auto Groups, then click on Toggle Mask by Polygroups. Masking is one of the really powerful features in ZBrush, and Mask by Polygroups is a fantastic tool in that arsenal. You see, when you're doing hard surface work, precision is the name of the game. You're often dealing with well-defined areas. So imagine you're working on a complex piece, which has loads of individual sections or polygroups. That's where Mask by Polygroups steps in. When you toggle this feature on, it makes sure your brush only affects the first polygroup it touches. It's just like putting up an invisible barrier that keeps your sculpting work contained just where you want it. It really takes away a lot of the stress when you're working on detailed hard surface models. Being able to focus on one part at a time without the fear of ruining other parts is a major relief. So I would definitely recommend Mask by Polygroups for anyone into hard surface modeling in ZBrush. Next up, let's select Extrude Polyloop. Then switch it to Extrude Flat Island. Go ahead and select the polygroup and press Auto Groups. Unmask the polygroup and scale it down a bit. Press QC50 and make a few scaling adjustments. Now we can press Apply and set the Dynamesh utility poly count to 0.5. Let's turn off Mask by Polygroups and set the weighted smooth mode to 1. Now select a Clip Curve brush to trim down the top part. Let's adjust it a bit using the Pinch and Inflate brushes. Speaking of these two brushes, let's discuss a bit about what they do. We'll start with the Inflate brush. Imagine you have a balloon and you're blowing air into it. causing it to expand or inflate. That's pretty much how this brush works. It's really perfect for adding volume to your mesh. When you use the inflate brush over an area, it pushes vertices outwards, creating a puffed effect. This is great for adding mass, especially in organic models where you might want to create muscle structures or other forms that require some volume. But remember, it's not only for organic modeling. You can also use it in hard surface modeling to create cushion-like effects or give your model a bit more bulkiness in certain areas. Then there's the pinch brush. This brush does what its name suggests. It pinches the geometry of your model. Imagine taking a piece of clay and pinching it between your fingers. That's what this brush does digitally. When you drag it across your model, it pulls verts closer together, creating a tighter, more concentrated area. This brush is very useful when you want to create sharp edges, creases, or intricate details on your model. It's frequently used in both organic and hard surface modeling. So to wrap it up, the inflate brush and the pinch brush are kind of like two sides of a coin. One adds volume and creates a bulging effect, while the other reduces volume and creates a pinched effect. They both play key roles in shaping your models, whether you're working on a monster, a human, a spaceship, or anything in between. Let's choose the blue polygroup and click Delete Hidden. Again, let's use the Slice Curve brush to add a polygroup. Bring up the gizmo and from the Gear menu, select Remesh by ZRemesher. Drag the white cone until you reach 1000. A pretty nifty trick is that whatever settings you configure in the ZRemesher menu will be carried over to the ZRemesher in the gizmo. Let's go ahead and press Delete, then select Keep Groups with Smooth Groups set to 0. Go back to the gear and rerun Remesh by ZRemesher with the same settings. This time, I'll retain the poly group while maintaining a similar edge flow. If we set up poly groups to help with the edge flow, the gizmo's remesh would reflect that as well. I just wanted to demonstrate that ZRemesher setting carries over. Now go ahead and press Ctrl W to group visible. Next, from the Z-Modeler brush, select Extrude All Polygons. Then press Flip. Now go ahead and choose Crease PG. And from the Z-Modeler, select Crease for the polygon action, Poly Loop for the target, and Outer Targets for the modifier. Go ahead and make some minor adjustments with the Move brush. For demonstration purposes, let's move this part back. Mask the poly loop, invert the mask, and use the Clip Curve brush to straighten it out. Now we have these distorted edge loops, resulting in some rectangular faces. So we can unmask these edge loops and run a polish by features. However, this won't do the trick. What we need to do next is store a morph target. Unmask the middle polys and run a polish by features. This will smooth out the polys, but will reduce the volume. To restore the volume to its original state, slide the project morph to 100. Here's a before and after view of the topology using the project morph. Let's bring up the gizmo again, and from the gear menu, select Cylinder 3D. Scale it along the Z-axis. Unmask the end and extrude it with the gizmo. Rotate it and continue extruding. Unmask the end and move it out a bit. Then we can add some edge loops using Insert Multiple Edge Loops. Go ahead and press Group by Normals. Now we can grab the 12-sided IMM. Use the ZBrush to delete the extra edge loops. Press Ctrl W to group visible, then press QC50. Now set the crease level to 3. Q-mesh the flat island and hold Shift to move. Let's bring up the gizmo and select Polyplane from the gear. Adjust both cones to 100. We're going to subdivide it 4 times and then remove the lower subdivisions. Using the Mask Curve brush, mask out the shape we want. Then go ahead and sharpen that mask. Let's press Ctrl W to polygroup the mask. Now select the polygroup and delete hidden. Next, click on Mask by Features, invert the mask and blur it. Next, run a Polish by Features. We'll use the Slice Curve brush to set up the polygroups. Let's go ahead and enable Keep Groups while keeping the Smooth Groups to 0. Adjust the target polygon count to 0.5. Now set the target polygon count to 0.1 and click Retry. Retry is a handy little function that lets you Z-remesh again using the original mesh without having to undo it. Go ahead and make some tweaks using the Move Infinite Depth brush. We want to delete the bottom 3 polys and move the points down. Press Mask by Features and smooth the interior polys. From the ZBrush, extrude all polygons and then press Flip. Align it to the side view and scale it along the Z-axis. Let's bring up the gizmo and from the gear, select Deformer Soft. We can lock in the changes by pressing accept. I'm going to alternate between the move brush and the move infinite depth brush to refine it further. Press group by normals and crease the edge loop. Run a polish by features once more. Let's use the move infinite depth brush and press QC50. Go ahead and crease the edge loop. Set the crease level to 3. Now make a few more adjustments with the move brush. Unmask the polys and run a polish by features. Little by little, we're shaping our brace. Now we can return to the move infinite depth brush. Finally, unmask the middle polys and run a polish by features. Time to bring up the gizmo again. This time, choose Cylinder 3D from the gear. Unmask the bottom part and give it a slight rotation. Now unmask the top and rotate it downwards. Next, unmask the bottom again and extrude it using the gizmo. Scale it in just a bit and continue the extruding and adjusting process with the gizmo. Now we can grab the mask lasso brush. From the ZBrush, choose Scale Edge Loop Complete. Go ahead and add an edge loop, then scale it in. Follow this by adding another edge loop and scaling it out just a bit. From the ZBrush, choose Insert Multiple Edge Loops with Interactive Elevation. Now it's time for some beveling. Bevel the edge loop, and then insert another edge loop. Press Ctrl W to group visible. Q-mesh the poly loop and delete the edge loop. Again, let's group visible with Ctrl W. Now we can add in some more edge loops. Let's set up some creases using the ZBrush. Now we can set delete for the polygon action and flat island for the target. Go ahead and extrude all polygons and then press flip. Bevel the edge loops at the end of the exhaust, and then add some supporting loops. Turn on dynamic, set the smooth subdivisions to 4 and the crease level to 3. Now we want to delete the 2 internal poly loops. Next, crease the edge loops. Then delete the island. Finally, group visible with Ctrl W and then turn on dynamic. Bring up your trusty gizmo and this time select Cylinder 3D from the gear. Set the H divides to 48. Unmask the bottom, move it down and scale it in a little. Next, select Insert for the edge action, multiple edge loops for the target, and alternate poly group for the modifier. Then we can delete the caps. Let's go ahead and change that white poly group to a different color. For the polygon action, choose poly group, and for the target, poly loop and checker. Here's the fun part. Click on every other poly loop while pressing Alt. And then from the ZBrush, pick poly group all, and one group ID. Isolate all the different poly groups and press Ctrl W to group visible. Now we want to append a polymesh 3D star. Back to the gizmo and from the gear, go for the polyplane. Then we can split the point. Delete the middle edge loop. Now press the B key to open up the brush menu, then click on Create, Insert Mesh. When the option pops up, click New. Then press the B key once again, but this time, click on Create Nanomesh. Let's go back to the top subtool. For the ZBrush, select Insert Nanomesh for the polygon action and Polygroup All for the target. Now we can head over to the Nanomesh tab. We're going to want to turn off Show Placement, set the size to 1 and press Fit. Set all the rotations to 0. Then we can press 1 to mesh from the inventory. Go ahead and get rid of the unwanted polygroups. To match up the topology, isolate the polygroup. Set the grid divide segments to 2 and click on Grid Divide. Because of the grid divide, you'll see flat surfaces with extra edges. We need to fix that or it won't smooth out properly when we use dynamic subdiv. So duplicate the subtool, undo back until the cylinder was whole, go back to the other subtool and turn on dynamic. Now press weld points. Now switch back to the other subtool and turn on dynamic. Press apply and delete the lower subdivisions. Now we can head back to our working subtool and press project. We can go ahead and slide down the top edge loop to grab all the points for the projection. Let's extrude all the polygons and then press flip. Turn on dynamic. Then polygroup the outer two polygroups. From the ZBrush, select Inset for the polygon action and polygroup all for the target. QMesh polygroup all while holding down the Shift key. Then we can press Uncrease all, then Crease PG. Go ahead and crease the top poly loop. Let's rotate the model about -2 degrees. Hold Ctrl and move with the gizmo to extrude. Let's rotate it about 45 degrees and scale it out. Now we can transpose the bottom edge loop. Once more, hold down Ctrl and move with the gizmo to extrude. Then uncrease the poly loop. Now we want to crease the poly loop on the top and bottom. Transpose the top edge loop and scale it up. Insert a few more edge loops and uncrease them. Let's unmask the bottom edge loop and give it a tweak. Insert a few more edge loops and uncrease them. Press Ctrl W to group visible. Let's bring up the gizmo and from the gear, choose Cylinder 3D. Give it a sharp 90-degree rotation. Scale it along the x-axis. And now we can press QC50. Hold Ctrl and use the gizmo to duplicate. Then we can move it up and then scale it down. Unmask the top and extrude it up using the gizmo. Crease that edge loop and bevel the top. Now we can press Crease PG. Press flip and weld it along the x-axis with Ryan's tools. Let's activate symmetry in the x-axis and add in a couple of edge loops. Now set the crease level to 3. Let's go ahead and use the Spiral 3D primitive from the tools. It's the same one we used for the supercharger, but this time we're modeling a spring. Let's set the coverage to 4000 and both the start and end thickness to 20. The start and end radius should be 100. Set the art and end displacement to 3. No twist and the subdivision count to 350. Time to return to our working tool and insert the spring. Rotate the spring 90 degrees and scale it down. Turn on dynamic and set the smooth subdivision to 1. Now head over to the gear and select the deformer soft. When you're all set, press accept to lock it in. Now we can weld it along the x-axis. Mask out the model and bring up the gizmo. From the gear, choose the cylinder 3D. Invert the mask and split unmasked points. Rotate it 90 degrees and scale it down. Now we can scale it along the z-axis. Hold Ctrl and move with the gizmo to duplicate. Now we can delete both caps. From the ZBrush, select Bridge for the edge action, 2 holes in Circle for the target. Now select Move Infinite Radius and adjust the position of the edge loops. Then we can bevel those edge loops. Unmask the bevel edge loops and rotate them with the gizmo. Let's add in some edge loops using the Insert Multiple Edge Loops. Go ahead and press Ctrl W to group visible, then press QC50. Mask the bottom polys and run a Polish by Features. Go ahead and uncrease a couple of edges. Then weld it along the x-axis. Time for the gizmo again. From the gear, select Ring 3D. Invert the mask and split unmasked points. Scale it up and move it into position. Extrude all the polygons to shrink the ring. Now we can delete half the ring. Let's press close holes, unmask the caps, and extrude with the gizmo. Unmask the ends and extend them out. Hold Ctrl and move with the gizmo to duplicate. Then use the Clip Curve brush to flatten the ends. Unmask the other caps and clip them as well. Now we can delete the top arc. Mask the bottom and move it down with the gizmo. Go ahead and clip the top. Unmask the top and run a polish by features. Then delete the flat islands. We want to bridge the two holes. And add a few more edge loops to quad it up. From the ZBrush, choose Scale Edge Loop Complete. Now press Ctrl W to group visible. Again from the ZBrush, pick Close for the edge action, Convex Hole and Circle for the target, and Interactive Curvature for the modifier. We can just click to repeat the operation. Press Ctrl W to group visible, then turn on Dynamic. Unmask the polys and run a polish by features. Now we can weld it along the x-axis. Let's take a step back and look at the exhaust placed into position in our workspace. We'll revisit it later and add some welds to the springs. As for the springs, they're different sizes and they're hanging out on both sides of our model. With the exhaust done, next on our list is the shock absorber.